Now, this leads us to the Islamic definition. Now, what's very interesting is, from a traditional point of view, the term for atheism is ilhad, okay, which literally means godlessness or deviation. Now, this is a very interesting word because the word comes from, ilhad comes from the word lahad. So, linguistically, this implies that atheism is a deviation from what is natural and rational. Why am I saying this? Because the lahad, if you study the sunnah of burying people, there is a main hole that is dug, and there's a little side pocket at the bottom of the grave. That is called a lahad. Yeah. So you have a main hole that is dug, and in the side you have, what do you have? You have a lahad. You have a deviation from the main hole, if you like. So linguistically, ilhad, which is atheism or godlessness, the word itself implies a deviation from what is natural and rational. Also, we know that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ taught us that all human beings are born with innate nature. This is called the fitrah. And this is based on a hadith in Sahih Muslim. It's based on Quran chapter 30, verse 30 as well. We're going to discuss this later. But the point here is that all human beings are born with a fitrah, and that fitrah basically has an affinity towards the truth, if you take that opinion, and we're going to discuss this further, or the fitrah contains within it the truth of the basic ideas of Islam, namely that God exists and that He is worthy of worship. So, from this perspective, an atheist is unnatural, right? Not only is it a deviation, but it's also unnatural and irrational. Further to that, one would also argue that from an Islamic perspective, atheists are mushriks, right? They are mushriks. When you study Tawheed, when you study the oneness of God, and you study shirk, you will understand that we believe that God has names and attributes, and they're maximally perfect to the highest degree possible. For example, He is Al-Khaliq, He is Al-Hakim, He is Al-Khallaq, He is the creator, He is the wise, He is the perpetually creating. If someone denies these names and attributes, it's a form of polytheism. Why? It's a form of polytheism because to deny God's attributes, you really have to associate those attributes to something other than Allah, right? And sometimes you have this. Now, an atheist will deny a creator for the universe, and they'll say, you know what, the universe created itself, for example, yeah? I know that's a crude example, but I think you get the point. So they take these definitions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, these names and attributes of Allah, and they attribute it implicitly or explicitly to something other than Allah, and that is associating partners with Allah. That is shirk, okay? And denying them is also a form of polytheism in the science of Tawheed. So really, if you think about it, atheists are mushriks. Now, this doesn't mean... Now, I know some people say, look, atheists are halfway there. They say, La ilaha. I disagree with that approach. I think it's not nuanced, and I don't think it's accurate, because they may say there is no deity, but in saying that, they still have a deity anyway, implicitly or explicitly. And that's something very important for us to understand. Because when you don't worship Allah, you're worshipping something anyway, right? If you don't have an object of worship like Allah, who is worthy of worship, you're going to have another type of object of worship, whether you think you're worshipping it or not. Because remember what we said in the beginning, if you love something the most, you want to know something the most, you obey something the most, and you direct acts of worship such as ultimate gratitude towards something the most, that's your object of worship. And for some people, that could be their own hawa, their own shahawat, their own desires. As Allah says in the Quran, have you not seen the one who takes his desire as his Lord? Right? It could be leadership, the monks and rabbis. As Allah says, have you not, they've taken the monks and rabbis as lords, right? And if they love something more than Allah, and if that love is due to Allah only, but they give it to something else, that is also a form of shirk from that perspective. It's the shirk of love, right? So it's not as simple as saying, oh, they deny a creator. they may deny a creator, but they could never really deny an object of worship, because even if they deny Allah, who is worthy of worship, they already implicitly or explicitly have an object of worship anyway. But we're going to discuss that further in the session when we're talking about why Allah is worthy of worship. Another aspect which is very important is another kind of idea coming from the Islamic tradition is someone who rejects monotheism, and obviously atheists reject monotheism because they reject the creator. They're described as fools. As Allah says in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 130, and who would reject the faith of Abraham except a fool? Right? And also, then they're not certain. Because Allah says in chapter 52, verse 35 to 36, بَلْ يُقِنُونَ, they have no certainty. Those who reject the creator from that perspective. So you see here a kind of definition of atheism from the Islamic tradition. It is irrational, it's based on uncertainty, it is unwise and imprudent, and it's a form of shirk. This is what the Islamic tradition says about atheism in a really clear way, if you bring this all together. Now again, just because this is the stance of Islam on what atheism is, it doesn't now follow that we treat human beings unjustly, that we treat them not compassionately. No, as I said before, the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ and the Quran teaches us to treat individuals, to treat people with forbearance, to treat them with compassion, to treat them, to have hikmah, to have wisdom, to be committed to their well-being, which means want goodness for them and guidance for them based on the hadith of the Prophet